I want to know if I am truly barren. Ashton spoke without hesitation, and from then on he asked no more. Each time Celeste set down the bitter cup, he lifted it and drank it dry, as if placing his trust wholly in her hands. Strange fire stirred within him. Blood quickened, flesh awakened, as though years of withering had been swept away. He came to her, not by reason, but by instinct. Night after night, the wooden room thick with breath, the bathhouse veiled in steam, bore witness to their fierce embraces, their kisses that seemed without end. The bed creaked, the kitchen table once meant for medicine now marked by the long nights they twined together. Celeste trembled, yet deep within rose a question she dared not speak. Was fate itself being challenged? And could the cry of a newborn truly echo within these walls? On an autumn morning in 1887, Dodge City wore its familiar coat of dust. Horses neighed along the main street, wagons rumbled past, and the shouts of cowboys, still half drunk from the night before, hung in the air. In the midst of it all stood Hendrick's Diner, its weathered wooden sign swaying in the wind, a gathering place for drifters, miners, and traders. The smell of smoke, frying grease, and dust-stiffened horsehide clung heavy inside, swallowing whole whoever stepped through the door. That morning, Celeste Johnson came in with a plain apron tied hastily around her waist. She was 32, a black woman with a thin, unyielding face. She had knocked on every door for work, and with no family left, no protection, only her calloused hands and a faded cloth bag, she clung to this waitress job as her means of survival. Each step through the diner carried the weight of stares, whispers, and crooked smiles. The first laugh came when she passed a table of cowboys with a tray of coffee. One of them, red-faced from whiskey, stuck out his boot and hooked her ankle. The tray tilted, cups spilled, and scalding coffee splattered down the worn fabric of her dress. The whole diner roared with laughter. "Look there! Told you that skin only brings bad luck," one man shouted. "Careful! She'll set the place on fire," another hollered. The sound struck like a hammer blow. Celeste bit her lip, forcing her hands steady as she gathered the broken cups. The heat seared her skin, but worse was the contempt burning in their eyes. A few women pulled their children close and turned away, as if her very presence carried misfortune. She was used to it. Other towns, other diners, but the wound never dulled. Each time it was a new cut. Life had made her the butt of jokes too many times, and still, each echo of laughter sliced fresh. Then came the scrape of a chair in the corner. A tall, lean man rose to his feet. Silence fell like a dropped curtain. Ashton Hale. His name was known across Colorado. Owner of a vast ranch out on the plains, wealthy, with influence at the bank and with merchants. Folks whispered he was cold, that childhood fever had left him barren. Matchmakers had brought women to his door, but they always turned away, branding him a man unfit for family. Yet whatever people said, the name Ashton Hale was enough to hush a crowded room. He walked slow, boots thudding on the wooden floor, until he stood before Celeste. In the eyes of those who had laughed, something shifted, part fear, part shame. Ashton bent down and lifted her to her feet. A small gesture, but in that stifling air, it rang like defiance. From his coat pocket he drew a crisp white handkerchief and pressed it into her hand. His voice, low and steady, carried to every corner. "No one has the right to make sport of you. Only cowards take joy in shaming a woman." The diner froze. The red-faced cowboy fumbled, and the laughter that had rattled the walls shrank to uneasy coughs. Celeste raised her gaze. His gray eyes held no pity, no scorn, only a steady recognition, as if she were simply a person, no less, no more. Her heart beat hard with gratitude and wonder tangled together. He stood tall, his shadow cutting off the harsh sunlight pouring through the window. A silent wall, firm and unmovable, standing between her and the room. Taking her hand, he guided her away from the circle of eyes. "That's enough," he said. The words were quiet, but they bore the weight of a man who never needed to raise his voice. Laughter died completely. Only the clink of spoons and the creak of the diner door remained. Folks turned back to their meals, pretending nothing had happened. Celeste clutched the handkerchief tight. The sting of humiliation lingered, but with it came a new spark. This man, branded as one no woman would take, had given her something she had never once been offered: protection. The room grew noisy again, but for Celeste, nothing was the same. A door had opened, not to the dusty street outside, but into a different path altogether. One where her steps, for the first time in years, would not be entirely alone. That afternoon, sunlight poured through the cloudy panes of Hendrick's diner, breaking into crooked bands of gold across the grease-stained floorboards. The crowd had thinned, leaving only a few weary men tapping spoons against their cups for more coffee. Celeste still wore the dress stained by the morning's spilled brew. The sour smell clung to her skin, the damp cloth heavy, but she would not retreat to the back room. If she did, she knew the whispers of weakness would follow her. Head bowed, she cleared the tables, hands trembling as she gathered broken cups. A tall shadow came beside her. Looking up, she met Ashton Hale's gray eyes. He stood calm, hat in hand, waiting for her words. "Mr. Hale, I thank you for what you did this morning," she said. He gave a slow nod, his reply gravel deep. "Thank me for what?" "A man who sees wrong must stand against it. That is no favor." His voice carried the weight of years. Before Celeste could answer, he continued, gaze steady on her face. "Would you grant me the honor of dinner tonight? After your shift?" She froze. For years she had known only commands or ridicule. Never an honest request. Never an invitation from a man of standing. Her lips moved without sound. Ashton did not press. He simply waited, patient, without the predatory edge she knew too well in other men. Something in that patience loosened her, and at last she gave a small nod. "If you wish it." That night the wind whipped hard through Dodge's crooked rows of wooden buildings. Dust rolled across the street. Light from Pine Saloon flickered, and a banjo twanged in the distance. Ashton chose a small, out-of-the-way diner at the end of the street, its chairs uneven, but with a quiet corner that looked out on a darkened alley. Celeste entered, still in her faded dress, hastily washed, but not yet dry. Eyes flicked toward her, but no one laughed. Ashton was waiting, shoulders bent slightly, gray hair falling across his brow. When he saw her, he rose and pulled out a chair. "Thank you for coming," he said quietly. She gave a thin smile, folding her hands on her lap. The waiter set down 2 plates of cold meat, slices of bread, and a pot of strong black coffee. A poor meal, yet in that corner it felt solemn. At first they ate in silence, the scrape of utensils the only sound. Then Ashton broke it. "What do you make of what they said this morning?" Celeste's hand stilled. She lowered her eyes. "I've heard such words all my life. In every town, in every place, I am used to it. but being used to it does not mean it stops hurting. His eyes softened. I know. He laid down his knife, clasping his veined hands together. They say I am wealthy, that I have land and cattle. But they do not know the scar I carry. As a boy, fever left me barren. Doctors told me I could never father children. Since then, every woman brought to me has turned away. No one wants a house without a child's cry. I have all things, except a family. The words fell heavy on the table. Celeste studied him. He was no cold figure as rumor painted, but a man wounded in ways not unlike her own. She gave a faint, sorrowful smile. And I am the opposite. Nothing but myself. My parents died young, kin scattered. I have drifted from town to town, working for bread with my hands, but always as a shadow, never deemed enough to stay. Ashton tilted his head, meeting her eyes. Then both of us were left at the edges. The line caught in her chest. It was as if a mirror had been lifted, showing her own loneliness reflected back. Their gaze held, not silence now, but a quiet recognition. Outside, the wind moaned through cracks, dragging red dust under the door. Yet in that dim corner, a thin cord stretched between them. A man long rejected for what he could not give. A woman long discarded for the skin she bore. Two outcasts breaking bread together, sharing wounds no crowd would ever hear. Celeste drew a breath, voice low. Perhaps God grants us a chance, not to be accepted by the world, but to truly see each other. Ashton did not speak. He only lifted his cup of coffee and tipped it gently toward her. Their cups met with the softest sound, but in both their hearts, it rang louder than all the clamor out on the street. The supper ended without the heaviness that had marked its beginning. When Celeste rose, smoothing the faded dress at her waist, Ashton slipped into his coat with quiet gravity. Though his shoulders bent slightly, there was still that unshaken air of authority that no one in town dared dismiss. Together they stepped out into the night, yellow lamplight stretching long across the dust-choked street. Celeste meant to part ways, heading toward her cramped rented room, when Ashton halted. He turned, gray eyes carrying something she could not name. Celeste. His voice came low and rough. Have you thought of leaving this place? I don't mean the town. I mean this diner. What happened this morning will happen again, and I cannot stand by and watch you bear it once more. Her hand tightened around the strap of her bag. She had long grown used to rejection, but his words pressed against wounds still raw. I have no choice. $1 a day is luck enough in this place. Ashton stood silent a moment, then spoke slowly, as if the thought had lived with him a long while. My ranch lies at the edge of Silverbrook, half a day's ride. I need someone in the house, but more than that, I need company. That house is too wide, too quiet. It swallows even the sound of my breath. If you will, come there. Not just to work, but to fill the emptiness. His offer stunned her. It was unlike any she had heard before. Neither charity nor demand. It held something strange, honesty, and a loneliness laid bare. But fear rose quickly. She knew how a town like this feasted on rumor. A black woman, alone, living in the home of a wealthy rancher? The whispers would spread like wildfire. She shook her head faintly. They will talk, say things no one should. Ashton's gaze did not waver. Let them. They've spoken of me my whole life. I have no time left to live by their mouths. What I need is a home with breath in it. And I believe you could bring that in that moment. Celeste saw the fork in her path. One way led back to her dark, rented room, to the jeers she knew too well, to life repeating itself. The other, though fraught with risk, offered the chance to no longer live as a shadow. She looked into his eyes. There was no pity, only truth. Her heart hammered, and at last, she nodded. The first day at Hale Ranch, the prairie wind swept fierce, carrying the smell of dry grass and horse. The two-story house stood atop a rise, fields stretching in every direction. Celeste gripped her worn bag on the front step, unease and wonder mixing in her chest. Inside, the place was clean but hollow. Old frames hung on timbered walls. Long halls lay dust-streaked, and the hearth was cold, as if fire had forgotten it. Every footstep echoed, telling her plainly Ashton had lived too long alone. There was work aplenty, sweeping, stoking the stove, cooking. Yet more than chores, she felt what he truly needed. Each time she passed, his eyes followed briefly when she set a cup of honeyed tea by his bed during a coughing spell. He gave a nod, a fleeting smile rare enough to stay with her all day. Such small details like hidden threads began binding them together. One evening, Ashton returned weary from the fields. He sank into a chair, racked by harsh coughing. Celeste hurried with hot water, slicing ginger into the cup. When she placed it in his hand, their fingers brushed. The touch was brief, yet both looked up, eyes caught longer than reason required. Celeste turned quickly, cheeks flushed, while Ashton remained silent, though inside he knew her presence eased more than the emptiness of the house. Day by day, the space between them shrank. One morning, as Celeste hung wet linens, the wind tore a sheet loose. Ashton, stepping out, caught it and handed it back. His fingers pressed hers a heartbeat longer before letting go. Another time, while carrying wood into the kitchen, she slipped on damp earth. His hand caught her arm. His breath was near, his eyes deep, and she lowered her gaze in shy confusion. Yet the moment lingered. Neither spoke of it, yet each glance, each passing touch, built something slow and quiet between them. The house, once hollow, now carried the sound of broom on floorboards, pots on the stove, steady footsteps down the hall. At night, instead of wind howling alone, Ashton heard the soft stir of a woman tidying the kitchen. What once was ordinary noise had become balm against a lifetime of silence. He had long believed he was resigned to solitude, but now, watching Celeste by the fire, her face lit by its glow, he knew he was wrong. She filled not only the house but the hollow in his chest. In the quiet, he told himself, perhaps this was the true beginning of home. Evenings in the ranch house sank heavy with silence. After long days, Ashton would retreat early to his room, while Celeste stayed behind in the kitchen, scrubbing grease from dishes, rinsing the cloths, setting the place in order. Only when the house settled still did she allow herself a moment of solitude, in the small washroom at the end of the hall. It was the only space she could claim as her own. Behind the half-closed wooden door, beneath the dim glow of a lamp, Celeste slipped off her apron and washed away the day. Warm water poured over her narrow shoulders, running down sun-darkened skin, lifting the smoke and sweat and quiet weariness. Many nights she sank beside the basin, letting tears blend into the water, grief for parents buried long ago, for kin scattered to winds unknown. But tonight, no tears came. As the water streamed through her hair, a tune rose unbidden to her lips, the lullaby her mother had once hummed by the hearth. Low, aching, touched with sweetness, it filled only the little room, but in the hush of the house it carried farther than she guessed. Upstairs, Ashton lay restless, his chest raw from cough, yet it was not pain that kept him from sleep. A voice, soft, tremulous, drifted through the hall. He sat up, pulled on his robe, and descended to fetch water. Passing the washroom, he slowed. The door hung ajar, spilling a sliver of lamplight. He meant to walk on, but the sound held him still. Then, before he could stop himself, his gaze slipped through the narrow gap. He saw her. The lamp painted her shadow on the wall. Water traced her frame, slender yet resilient. Her bare shoulders glistened, dark hair falling loose, droplets sliding across her cheek. Ashton's throat tightened, chest heavy as iron. He knew he should turn away, yet his eyes betrayed him. Celeste turned, and in that instant, their eyes met. Her song broke, lips parted in shock. Heat rushed to her cheeks. She snatched a cloth against her chest, heart thundering. Ashton started, breath caught. He turned sharply, voice hoarse. "Forgive me. I did not mean—" He strode on, boots striking harder than usual against the boards. Inside the washroom, Celeste stood frozen, breath ragged. Shame tangled with something else. Unnamed, trembling, born of the way his eyes had held hers. That night, neither found sleep. Ashton lay staring at the timbered ceiling, mind seized by the image of her in lamplight, fragile and strong all at once. He pressed his eyes shut, willing the thought away, yet his heart beat hard, betraying him with every throb. Celeste curled beneath her blanket, clutching the cloth against her, face buried in the pillow. That look, sudden, searing, still ran through her veins like fire. For the first time in years, her heart raced not from fear alone, but from something she dared not name. After that night, when their eyes had met by chance, Hale House sank into a silence unlike before. No greetings, no easy words passed between them. Only the creak of footsteps on the boards, the whistle of wind through the windows, and the invisible wall of unease stretched taut between two souls already set apart. Celeste kept to her duties, stoking the fire, setting the table, scrubbing the cloths. Ashton rose early, rode the land, returned weary, shoulders bent. Yet whenever they crossed paths in the hall, each turned away, their glances dodging, as if touch itself were dangerous. The house, once merely quiet, now carried a weight that pressed hard on every breath. That evening, the long wooden table seemed endless, though only two sat at it. Celeste set the bowl of stew before him, then lowered herself opposite. The faint clink of spoon against dish echoed sharp, but no words came. Until at last Ashton laid his spoon down, lifted his gaze and broke the silence with his rough, low voice. "I am sorry." Her hand trembled on the spoon. She kept her head bowed, waited a moment before answering, voice barely above a whisper. "It is nothing." Do not trouble yourself, but inside, a storm churned. Never in her life had a man looked at her as a woman. The eyes she had known were filled with scorn, with mockery. She feared his look had been no different, that he had seen only a black body stripped bare, nothing more. Her fingers clenched the spoon until they blanched. She tried to keep her face calm, lips pressed tight to hide the sorrow. Ashton watched, his own eyes dimming with understanding. The silence between them grew too heavy, and then, as though he could not hold it back, his words came, steady yet unsteady. "You are beautiful." The spoon slipped from her hand, striking the bowl with a sharp ring. Celeste's eyes lifted wide, disbelieving. Ashton did not flinch. His gray gaze held firm, every word falling with the weight of truth. "I have never seen a woman so bare, and never one who unsettled me so deeply." She sat frozen, heart hammering against her ribs. All her life she had been called cursed, ugly, unlucky. Never once had those two words been spoken for her, beautiful. For a fleeting moment, she wished to turn away, to deny it for the shield of habit. But his eyes, there was no jest, no hunger, only the naked honesty of a man confessing fear, fear of his own feeling. Her head bent, her hands shook. Tears swelled, slipping free despite her will. Drawing a breath, she whispered, "You need not say such things to ease me." He shook his head, voice deep and plain. "I do not speak to comfort. I speak because it is true." The moment held, stretched long. The lamp sputtered, shadows wavering across the wall, framing two figures, a man who had resigned himself to a life of solitude, and a woman the world had always cast aside. That night, neither finished their supper. When Celeste rose to clear the table, Ashton kept his hand closed tight around his spoon, as if holding fast to the fragile moment. And within him stirred a truth yet unspoken. Her presence had given the house a soul. That night, Hale House sank into a silence that stretched without end. Beyond its walls, Silverbrook pulsed with clamor, horses clattering, music spilling from the grand halls where the powerful gathered. Ashton Hale had been among them, drawn into handshakes, forced to drain glass after glass beneath stares both respectful and prying. He drank more than he ever would, to dull the truth that he remained always on the outside looking in. By the time he returned, the cold wind could not clear the heat of wine from his blood. Yet his steps did not lead him to his own chamber. Whether it was drink or the weight of longing unspoken for too long, he found himself before the door at the far end of the hall, Celeste's room. The door stood ajar, lamplight spilling weak and gold. He rapped once, but his hand pressed forward before answer came. The door creaked open. Celeste had just bathed. Her hair hung damp over her shoulders, droplets sliding down the brown of her skin. She wore only a thin garment clinging to her narrow frame. When she lifted her face, surprise caught her breath. "Asher," her voice trembled. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. His eyes glimmered strangely through the haze of drink. He drew near, heavy steps deliberate, until only a breath stood between them. His words rasped out, rough, stripped bare. "I want to know if I am truly barren." Celeste froze, heart racing. She half-stepped back, clutching the edge of the cloth at her shoulder. "You are drunk. Let me take you back to your room." Ashton gave a faint laugh, unsteady, yet earnest. "Yes, I am drunk. But these words are true." His hand lifted, tipping her chin gently upward. His fingers were cool, her skin warm, forcing her to meet his eyes. Gray, shadowed, filled with both fear and hunger. He bent, and his mouth found hers. At first she stiffened, startled. But in that moment all the years of loneliness pressed down, and something else rose. A need to be seen, to be wanted as a woman. Slowly, almost against her will, her arms wound around his neck. She answered his trembling kiss. Ashton drew her close, arms circling her waist, lifting her as though she might vanish. He carried her to the bed, breath ragged against her racing pulse. Her wet hair clung to her cheek. He brushed it back, revealing the curve of her collarbone, pressing his lips along the line of her skin. "Asher," she whispered, voice breaking. He stilled, mouth close to her ear. "Are you afraid?" Her head shook faintly, eyes closed. The shyness lingered but mingled with surrender. For the first time, she did not flee a man's gaze. His hands found the edge of her thin garment, tugging slow, fabric catching once at her shoulder before slipping down. She bit her lip, holding back the sound that threatened to rise, a sound woven of shame and awakening all at once. His lips traveled across skin hardened by years of toil, scarred by labor. Yet under his touch, she felt changed, not mocked, not despised, but cherished, desired. The bed creaked under their shifting weight, their breaths tangled, filling the room. The world outside faded. No silver brook, no stairs, no cruel laughter. Only two forsaken souls bound by the hunger to live, to love, to be seen. Awkwardness fell away, replaced by a blaze of warmth. Her hands clung to his back. His hands, trembling yet sure, held her as though she were a miracle he dared not lose. When at last they lay quiet, breath easing, Celeste pressed her cheek against his chest, hearing the wild hammer of his heart. Ashton closed his eyes, pulling her closer, whispering into her damp hair. "If this is a mistake, it is the one thing in my life I will not regret." Celeste gave no answer. Her tears fell soft, mingling with the sweat upon the pillow. But they were not tears of sorrow. They were the tears of a woman, at last, allowed to be wholly herself, unhidden, unashamed. That night, her small room no longer held silence. It held a secret, a beginning that both knew would change every day to come. News in Silverbrook needed no messenger. It slipped on the wind, clung to saloon counters, market stalls, and church pews. Within weeks, everyone knew. Celeste Ward, the black stranger, was not merely a servant in Hale House. She held a place in the room of the wealthy rancher himself. At first it was whispers over domino boards, then chuckles on store porches. Soon, it hardened into open scorn. "She's only using him. Hale's a fool to fall for a woman like that. Wait and see. She's counting the days until he dies so she can grab his fortune." Celeste heard it all. If not directly, then in the stairs when she came for salt or cloth at market. Housewives tugged their children aside as if she carried plague. Drunken men leaned against posts, whistling low and laughing loud as she passed. Some made sure she caught every word. "Don't see what he's taken with." Black skins no better than chimney soot, Celeste lifted her chin, lips tight. Inside, her heart cut raw. She had lived through such barbs all her life, but never easily. This time was worse, for the insults struck not only her, but him. One morning she returned from market with a meager basket of produce. She set it on the kitchen table, sank into a chair, shoulders trembling. She could bear what they said of her, but the thought of Ashton being dragged down by it twisted inside her. He stepped into the room, saw her posture, and understood. He asked nothing, only laid his rough hand on her shoulder. She looked up into the steady gray of his eyes. "I hear what they say," he rumbled. but they do not know the truth. If anyone's using anyone, it is me, using you to make a home. Tears welled as she shook her head. You don't have to comfort me. I know what I am in their eyes. His grip on her shoulder tightened, his gaze fierce in its calm. In their eyes, I am only a barren man, a body waiting for the grave. They are wrong about me, and they are wrong about you. We do not live to satisfy gossip. We live to prove the truth by the lives we build. The words fell deep, sparking light in her chest. Beneath his weariness, she saw something stronger, a resolve not to let the town crush the fragile bond they had made. In the days that followed, Ashton showed no change. He rode into town upright in the saddle, Celeste seated beside him in the wagon. Every sneer met only his cold, level stare, not daring, not bowed. Celeste's hands shook in her lap, but when his hand brushed hers and lingered, she understood. This was more than protection. It was his declaration. And in Ashton's heart, a vow grew clearer. He had once resigned himself to loneliness, but now that he had her, he would not let rumor or malice tear it away. The town buzzed with talk. Yet in that storm, a root of steadfastness took hold in both their hearts. It would grow, despite every whisper, until Silverbrook itself would be forced to reckon with it. Word of Ashton Hale's declaration spread faster than prairie wind. From Red Jack's saloon to the market stalls, from domino boards in the corner store to the pews of the church, every tongue carried it. Ashton Hale was to wed Celeste Ward, the black woman who had come to live beneath his roof. He's lost his wits. Marry a colored woman with no kin or standing? She's either a burden or a gold digger. Just wait. She'll be sitting on his wealth the day he dies. The venom wrapped itself around every corner of Silverbrook. Celeste heard it in every step through town, in every sideways glance. Housewives pulled children aside, men smirked and spat, and more than one voice rang loud enough for her to hear. Still, she kept her head high, though her hands trembled hidden in her skirts. Ashton rode as always, back straight, gray eyes unshaken. To him, the decision was no longer trial, but declaration. His life would belong to her alone. The wedding was set without delay. The little wooden chapel at the edge of town, more used to funerals than nuptials, was draped with a faded strip of white cloth in place of decoration. Reverend Clark hesitated at first, but one look into Ashton's unwavering eyes left him no room to object. On the morning of the vows, the sky was clear, but the air brimmed with restless curiosity. The townsfolk filled the pews, not to bless, but to gawk. The benches creaked beneath them, their whispers thick as flies. Celeste entered, clad in a simple dress hastily stitched by the seamstress at Ashton's request. The fabric was ivory, plain, with no lace or trim, yet it fit her narrow form with quiet grace. With each step she took, the murmur swelled. White on the gown, but dark underneath. He's truly beyond saving. Silverbrook's grandest joke. She heard every word. Her chest tightened, but her chin stayed lifted. In her hands, a small bouquet cut from Hale's own back garden trembled in her grip. At the altar, Ashton waited, suit pressed, shoulders square, eyes fixed on her alone. When their gazes met, the noise fell away. He did not see her as town curiosity or scandal. He saw her as the woman he had chosen. The vows were spoken. Her voice held steady, though her throat ached. His, graveled by cough, still rang firm. No music played, no roses bloomed, only wind slipping through the chapel cracks, and sunlight cutting jagged across the floorboards. When Reverend Clark declared them husband and wife, silence followed. No applause. Only a few snickers, a whistle from the back. Ashton clasped her hand. His palm was cold, but the grip unyielding. He bent close enough that only she could hear. Let them. From now on, it is only us. Her eyes blurred with tears. In that moment she understood. Every jeer, every gaze outside mattered nothing. What mattered was this hand holding hers, steady and certain. Together they walked down the aisle, past rows of faces twisted with curiosity and disdain. A few men sneered, a few women shook their heads. Ashton never released her hand. He helped her into the waiting wagon, and as the wheels rolled, the whispers trailed behind like dust. Yet in their hearts, another vow had been set, to live together, defying the world itself. To Silverbrook, the wedding was a farce. To Ashton and Celeste, it was the first stone laid in a true home, built not on approval, but on pride and courage. Since the wedding, Hale House had begun to change. Celeste was not only a wife, but a seeker of hope. By day, she pored over tattered medical books found in a second-hand shop outside town. By night, she sat in the kitchen, lamplight casting long shadows over her weathered face, grinding leaves, boiling roots, stirring honey into bitter brews. Every potion she prepared carried one prayer, that somehow she might heal the ailment that had bound Ashton since boyhood. Celeste believed perhaps God might grant them a miracle. She wanted Ashton not only as a husband, but as a father. Silverbrook saw none of this devotion. All the town saw were bundles of herbs carried home, and soon gossip bloomed like weeds. She's bewitching him. Hale will drink himself into the grave with her potions. That woman's just waiting to inherit. Celeste heard it all, but her face stayed calm. She knew Ashton was her only hope, and she was his last. Ashton never questioned her. Each time Celeste set down the cup, he lifted it and drained it. Bitter as gall, yet in his eyes shone something fierce, trust. And then the strange began. His body stirred as though waking from long slumber. At first only a quicker heartbeat, then a heat spreading through his veins. With each new mixture Celeste tried, Ashton felt blood surge, flesh alive, as if fire burned inside. He came to her not by reason, but by instinct. Night after night he could not stay away. In the wooden room, in the kitchen still heavy with the scent of herbs, in the steam-shrouded washroom, every space bore the echo of ragged breath, of fierce embraces, of kisses that would not end. Celeste, shy at first, melted in his arms. At times she felt swept up herself, as though both were pouring out every ounce of life to defy fate. The bed groaned beneath long hours. The kitchen table once meant for medicine became the place they clung together, holding as though to let go was to be lost forever. In hot water, steam rising, Ashton's arms locked around her, his whisper raw against her ear, that he had never felt so alive. Each night, Celeste trembled, but beneath the trembling was a dawning conviction. Not only his body was changing, but her own faith. Perhaps the remedies truly worked. Perhaps he was not as hopeless as the doctors had claimed. Ashton felt it too. After every storm of passion, he lay beside her, sweat on his brow, his wide hand still clasping hers. His eyes shone with vigor, with a flame she had never seen. He was no longer a man awaiting death, but one who had found reason to trust in tomorrow. The town's rumors swelled, but inside Hale House, truth wrote its own tale. Each time Ashton came to her burning with heat, each time they gave themselves until strength was gone. It was not sorcery nor trickery, it was proof. Proof that love and faith could rattle even what was long thought dead. The kitchen still smelled of bitter herbs, but laced within it lingered the scent of nights unrestrained, of a rebirth no gossip could erase. And Celeste, with all her heart, believed that one day a child's cry would rise within these walls, the only answer the world would ever need. Rumors never die on their own. They grow, clinging to Silverbrook like red dust in the wind. What began as whispers turned to mocking laughter, and at last into angry shouts. Folks claimed Celeste Ward worked charms, that the brews she carried home were draining Ashton Hale's strength, that she was no wife at all, but a witch. One autumn night, the air was dry and cold. Celeste was tidying the kitchen when the noise reached her, hollers rolling through the dark like thunder. She went to the window and saw them, a line of flames climbing the hill, torches blazing, boots pounding, sticks clashing, liquor spitting fire into their curses. "Come out, witch! Give Hale back to us! You'll not poison him and steal his fortune!" Celeste's heart hammered, yet she did not retreat. Instead, she opened the front door and stepped onto the porch. Below, no fewer than 20 faces glared, red with drink, eyes lit with fury. They faltered when they saw her, a slender woman, black dress whipping in the wind, standing tall against the blaze. The firelight carved her figure into something both solitary and defiant. Bannon Quaid, a bloated traitor, staggered forward and pointed a trembling hand. "Celeste Ward, we know what you've done. Hale's wasting away because of you. Those brews you cook each night, we all see them." The crowd answered with pounding sticks, their voices crashing like surf. Celeste drew a breath, her hand pressed firm on the railing. Her voice carried strong into the wind. "If caring for my husband is a crime, then condemn me." For a heartbeat, silence. Her words cut sharp, steady. She let her gaze sweep them, eyes glinting in the firelight. "You see me late at night boiling herbs, mixing honey and ginger root, and you call it poison. Yet those same things have eased his breath, stilled his nights. You do not lie awake beside him. You do not see the cold sweat on his back. You only stand outside, throwing stones. Some faces dropped, though others muttered, still restless. Bannon bellowed back, "Sweet words hide nothing." He grows thinner still. "What proof have you that you're not the cause?" Her grip tightened on the railing. Her answer rang clear. "I give you his life as proof. If I meant him harm, he'd be dead long since. But he lives. He grows stronger because of me. If you think a wife labors each day only to kill her husband, then you've never known loyalty." The air grew heavy. Torches swayed in the wind. Celeste stood firm, knowing one rash move could unleash them all. Then came footsteps behind her, heavy, steady on the wooden floor. Ashton Hale stepped into the doorway. He wore a long coat, tall and lean, yet unbending. His gray eyes burned against the dark, commanding as though fire and wind themselves parted for him. He strode onto the porch, slow, deliberate. Each step made the crowd shift back. His voice fell over them, rough and low, every word like iron. If I live, it is because of my wife. If I should die, I will die in her arms, and gladly. The crowd stilled. No more shouting, only the wind hissing through the grass. Ashton stepped forward, chest rising. You see, I am changed. Yes, stronger, blood hotter, life stirring again. And that is not by your hand. It is by hers. The woman you mock has saved me. My life, my house, my fate. None of it is yours to meddle in. The words struck like hammer blows. Torches dipped. Some men lowered their eyes. A few turned away, shame burning through their drink. Barren stood dumb, his lips working, no sound coming. Celeste looked up at her husband. To her, he was not only the man she had wed, but the wall that stood unyielding between her and the world. He turned, hand trembling but strong as it clasped hers. Before all, he said, "This is my wife, and from this night on, any who wish to touch her must go through me." The mob broke. Torches guttered, feet shuffled back down the hill, their curses dying to whispers, then to nothing. On the porch, only two remained, hand in hand, hearts pounding in one rhythm. Justice had not come by gun or blade, but by truth, a living man who stood tall, and a wife who had kept him so with love. That spring, the prairie of Silverbrook awoke with new life. Winds drifted down from the far mountains, carrying the scent of fresh grass. Sunlight poured wide across the green slopes. In the wooden house on the hill, Celeste stood before a small mirror, her hand pressed gently to her belly. A faint rhythm, fragile yet certain, beat in time with her own. The miracle had come. She was with child. At first, Celeste did not dare believe. The morning dizziness, the sudden waves of nausea, her steps growing heavier. Each sign stirred both doubt and hope. She counted the days, wrote down the changes. When certainty came, tears broke loose, trembling and joyful all at once. The man the town had branded Barren was now to become a father. Ashton was struck silent when she told him. He clasped her hand, trembling like a boy. His gray eyes, once so steady, blurred with tears. "Celeste, you have given me an entire new life." That night he sat by her abed for hours, whispering prayers of thanks, as if afraid the blessing might slip away. The news traveled swifter than wind. Silverbrook reeled. The old rumor, "Hail is barren," vanished like ash on the breeze. In its place came startled words, hushed yet insistent. "Celeste truly carries a child." Then we were wrong all along. Perhaps it was love that saved him. The stares in town shifted. Where once had been sneers, now came looks edged with curiosity, even reluctant respect. At market, whispers no longer chased Celeste. A few women even dipped their heads in greeting, awkward but real. They would not speak it aloud, but the truth was plain. Celeste was no witch, no schemer. She was the wife who bore within her the legacy of a love that had defied everything. The months of waiting passed, and Ashton cared for her with a patience he had never known in himself. The man once deemed cold now rose early to cook thin porridge, to carry warm water, to steady her steps onto the porch for the morning air. Celeste sat in her rocking chair, hands over her swelling belly, eyes soft upon him, smiling that quiet smile born only of those who have known sorrow and survived it. On sleepless nights, Ashton read scripture by her side, voice rough but steady. He spoke to her, and to the child they awaited. Grow strong, little one, in your mother's arms, and in the faith your father has found again. The birth came on a summer night stormed by rain. Thunder shook the hills, wind roared through the fields. Celeste labored in pain, sweat streaming down her face. Ashton gripped her hand, heart lurching with terror he had never felt in all his brushes with death. And then, through the pounding rain, a cry pierced the night, a strong, fierce cry. A son, red and whole, was placed into Celeste's arms. She wept, clutching the child to her chest, whispering, "Our miracle." Ashton dropped to his knees beside the bed, his great hands trembling as they touched the baby's cheek. Tears ran freely. "He is ours, Celeste." "You have given me everything," he named the boy Gabriel, God's messenger. In his heart, the child was proof eternal that love could break any curse, any scorn. News of the birth spread through Silverbrook. Those who had once carried torches to Hale's door now lowered their heads. They saw Ashton in town, holding his son high, face lit with a joy no one had ever seen in him. Whispers circled, hushed and awed. "Hale has broken the curse. It must be her hand that saved him. We were wrong from the start." The cruel words of old were buried, never spoken again. In their place came glances of wonder, even grudging admiration. Inside the house, joy overflowed. Ashton spent hours at the cradle, watching Gabriel sleep, his broad hand brushing the tiny fingers curled around his own. He whispered, "My son, you are the greatest legacy I will ever leave behind." And Celeste, watching her husband and child together, felt a peace she had never thought possible. The years of mockery, the sneers on train platforms, the stares at markets, all of it dissolved. Life had repaid her with its richest gift, a true family. That autumn, on the porch beneath a blazing sunset sky, Ashton held Gabriel in his arms while Celeste sat close beside him. They gazed out toward the mountains, the wind rippling across golden fields. No more whispers, no more flames. Only three souls, one home and a love that had endured. And the child in their arms was their legacy, the living proof that when two hearts choose to trust, no curse, no judgment, no crowd can ever stand between them. The seasons turned gently after Gabriel's birth, and the ranch on the hill bore a new rhythm. Each dawn no longer began with silence, but with the small stirrings of life. An infant's hungry cry, Celeste's soft footsteps, Ashton's low murmur as he tried, awkwardly but tenderly, to rock his son back to sleep. The townsfolk, once eager for scandal, now watched with a mix of curiosity and quiet unease. Some still whispered, but their words lacked venom. It was hard to spit poison at the sight of Ashton Hale, once gaunt and hollow, walking through Silverbrook with a child pressed close to his chest, eyes alight with a joy the town had never known from him. Even the most hardened tongues faltered when Gabriel's laughter spilled over the market stalls, bright as spring water. Life in the house found a steady pattern. Celeste worked harder than ever, yet her labors carried purpose. She no longer felt like an outsider surviving on scraps of others' mercy. Here she was mistress of a home, mother of a child, and partner to a man who no longer shrank from hope. In the quiet hours of the evening, when Gabriel finally slept, Ashton would often sit beside her, their chairs angled toward the fire, saying little. Words were not needed. The weight of his hand over hers, the flicker of flames, the hush of prairie wind outside. It was enough to remind them both how far they had come. When Gabriel reached his first year, Ashton insisted on a gathering at the ranch. Only a handful of close neighbors came, but it was enough to shift the town's gaze. They watched the boy stumble on uncertain legs through the grass, his laughter ringing across the yard. No curses followed, no slurs whispered. Some smiled, others only stared. But the silence itself was victory. For Ashton, fatherhood reshaped everything. Where once he had measured success by land, cattle, and numbers in the bank, now it was by Gabriel's first steps, his first tooth, his first clear word. At night he would kneel beside the cradle, whispering prayers not of wealth but of protection, that the child would grow strong, kind, unbroken by the cruelty that had scarred both his parents. Celeste, too, changed. She moved through the house with a quiet confidence that had once seemed impossible. She sang to Gabriel the songs of her mother and grandmother, songs that spoke of survival, of dignity in the face of disdain. Her voice, once a trembling whisper in the washroom, now filled the rooms boldly, carrying not only to her child, but to Ashton as well. Many nights he would pause at the doorway, listening, his chest tightening with gratitude that this woman, this once scorned, once shunned woman, had chosen to build her life with him. The prairie itself seemed to take on their peace. The hills rolled out in endless waves of gold and green. The sky stretched wide above, and the wind, once biting with loneliness, now seemed to hum with warmth. By the time Gabriel turned 2, the memory of torches and jeers shouts had faded, though never fully vanished. Silverbrook remembered, but it also adjusted. The boy was too real, too loud, too healthy for the town to cling to its old lies. A few of those who had shouted the loudest now tipped their hats when passing Ashton. And though the gesture was stiff, it was there. On quiet evenings, Ashton often spoke of legacy. Land may pass, cattle may die, fortunes may scatter, he told Celeste, as they watched their son chase fireflies in the dusk. But what we leave in him, our courage, our faith, our love, that is the only thing the world cannot take. Celeste would smile softly, leaning her head to his shoulder. She, who had once walked into town bent beneath the weight of stairs, now sat tall on the porch of her own home, her son's laughter rising into the twilight. In the months after Gabriel's birth, the wooden house on the hill seemed clothed in a new skin. It was no longer the hollow place of a man who once waited for death, nor the refuge of a woman long branded a curse. Every corner now pulsed with sound, the infant's cries, the soft laughter that followed, the weary sighs of relief after nights without sleep. Ashton Hale, once the wealthy man chained by the town's verdict of barrenness, now woke each morning with a purpose utterly different: to hold his son. Gone were the hours he sat brooding in silence. Instead, he hurried to the cradle, watching Gabriel stir with wide, searching eyes, tiny hands reaching into the air as though to grasp the world. Celeste, who had borne humiliation through so many years, now carried in her arms a living answer to every insult. Her days brimmed with labor, caring for husband, now caring for child. But for the first time, weariness felt meaningful. At the sound of Gabriel's bright laughter, every old wound softened. Every scar seemed almost healed. That summer, when Gabriel was 6 months old, Ashton placed him astride the saddle for the first time. The old horse, companion of many hard years, moved slowly across the yard while Ashton held his son close. Gabriel's eyes glimmered with wonder at the sway and the breeze. From the porch, Celeste watched with a heart caught between fear and joy. She had never dared dream of such a sight, a family whole, unshaken, and alive. In the evenings, Ashton carried the boy out to the fields. Though Gabriel understood nothing, Ashton spoke to him of wind and grass, of horses' hooves and the far horizon. He guided his son's hand to the horse's mane, taught him to look outward toward distances that stretched beyond fear. Celeste lingered by the doorway, her gaze lingering on husband and child. The man once half dead in spirit had risen again, and more than that, he was now a father. Silverbrook could not help but change. At first, the town was silent, held by the undeniable fact of Celeste's pregnancy and birth. But as months passed, their silence turned to reluctant acknowledgement. When Ashton rode through town with Gabriel in his arms, people no longer whispered. A few men tipped their hats. Some women offered strained smiles. At market, one woman muttered to her friend, "They said she was a witch. But tell me, what witch brings forth such a strong child?" Celeste heard it, and only smiled, clutching Gabriel tighter. She needed no apology. The changed look in their eyes was enough. Life was not without its trials. Nights filled with Gabriel's crying left them both worn thin. Ashton still coughed, still leaned on the herbs Celeste brewed. But what once felt like shame or weakness had shifted. To him, every bitter cup she pressed into his hand was not defeat, but a moment shared, her eyes meeting his, their silence thick with understanding. Often in those quiet exchanges, he would whisper, "You did not only save me, Celeste. You gave me reason to want to live." And each time, warmth spread through her chest. Years of loneliness and contempt had all led here, to be seen so, to be called wife, to be called mother. When Gabriel turned 2, Ashton held a gathering at the ranch. It was no grand affair, only a few trusted ranch hands and neighbors. Yet for the first time, Silverbrook witnessed a scene that could not be denied. The son of Ashton Hale, dark-skinned and radiant, running across the grass with laughter spilling out. None dared speak against it. Men who once marched with torches lowered their eyes when they saw Celeste carry her son onto the porch. The truth was carved plain before them. Love and loyalty had prevailed. Celeste began teaching Gabriel what her mother and grandmother had taught her: how to steep herbs for a fever, how to read the wind for rain, how to treasure each simple meal. Ashton taught him what he knew: the land, the cattle, the strength of keeping one's word. Between them, they wove a childhood rich in wisdom and care. Some nights, the three of them sat on the porch, Gabriel dozing in his mother's arms as Ashton told stories. He spoke of his sickly youth, of years of rejection, always ending with a lesson. Son, never scorn anyone, for when the world turns its back, even one soul who stays can change your life entire. Celeste, watching in the red glow of sunset, saw in her husband no longer the marks of sorrow, but a man who had found his meaning. Years passed swiftly. Gabriel grew strong, his eyes bright as autumn skies, his smile wide as his mother's. He raced through the ranch yard, shouting for his father, for his mother. The once quiet house now rang with his steps, with laughter that spilled out through its walls. Celeste and Ashton often found themselves sitting still, watching him. In their silence lay the same thought. Every insult, every torch, every cruel whisper had been endured only to reach this, a family, real and whole. On the wind-lashed hill of Silverbrook, the old wooden house stood firm, roof darkened with age, yet sturdy as the love that built it. Neither Ashton nor Celeste lived a charmed life. He had been called barren, doomed. She had been scorned for her skin and cast aside. Yet when two lonely hearts chose to bind themselves, they rewrote the tale. Out of gossip and contempt, they shaped a home where cries and laughter and tender words filled the air each day. Ashton did not die alone, as many had foretold. He lived to hear his son call him father, lived to see his wife lift her head high in the very town that once spat upon her, lived to know that love had healed more deeply than any herb or tonic could. Celeste was no longer the silent woman enduring shame in the corner of a train car. She had become foundation, proof of the endurance of a heart that dares to love and believe. And perhaps, dear listener, as you look back upon your own life, after long years and many palm roads, you may see yourself in their story. You may remember a glance forgotten, a hand never held, a rumor that wounded. But as Ashton and Celeste proved, sometimes all it takes is one soul who stays, one soul who believes, and the whole of life can be remade. If this story has stirred an old memory of a spouse who held your hand through storms, or of a love that endured the sneers of the world, share it with us in the comments. Tell us what you call the legacy of love, so that those who come after may learn from your journey. And if you wish to walk further with us through these warm, enduring Wild West love stories, stories of resilience, of loyalty, of faith in love, please press like and subscribe. Every share, every word you leave behind keeps the flame alive, so that together we may pass on these tales. For love, as Ashton and Celeste's life has shown, never grows old. It can still warm the heart, even when the road behind us has stretched long.